Dank. Auch vielen Dank, dass ihr alle gekommen seid, weil ich weiß, nebenan ist Cory Doctorow und das ist natürlich immer eine tolle Sache, aber ich soll auf Englisch reden. Ich bin der zweite Deutsche, der jetzt auf Englisch redet. Ich bin eigentlich aus Köln, aber ich lebe in Boston, habe lange in Südafrika gelebt. And I am going to speak about adventures and learning. And I have to say, we both are speaking about MOOCs, but I have a very different fascination with learning and online and MOOCs. And I want to make 2 points. One point is that learning can be the greatest adventure that we can experience, and that we should be thinking, or we could be thinking about learning as an adventure, and that may give us new ideas for how online learning could work. And then secondly, that this is one of the most exciting times to experiment with learning because of some of the possibilities that exist today, coming from technology, but also the institutional interest. And there's space for innovation right now that wasn't there 10 years ago, that wasn't there 20 years ago. And I hope that more people get involved and start experimenting and start prototyping and start building things that they're excited about. So this is an interesting study experiment that was done at the place where I work now. Where students were given these wristbands that measured kind of a proxy for engagement or activity and cognition. And then they wore them for a while. It's a very small sample size, though it's preliminary, but they wore them for a while. And essentially, if you look at I don't know if you can see it from down there, but if you look at the results, you can see the activity levels spiking at certain points, and then there's different color bars below them. And the kind of frustrating or disappointing thing is that the lowest levels of activity across all of this are when the students go to class. So they have higher activity even when they do chores, when they watch TV, much higher when they sleep. And so it's kind of a summary, really, of this situation, except that obviously this is more scientific. But it tells us something about the way that we are doing education right now may not totally be working, or at least not for everyone. And also, this is from MIT, and MIT is a great university. I don't know if MIT necessarily has much better teachers than other universities, but I would say they're not worse or significantly worse than other teachers. And so, I think this is something to kind of keep in mind. And the other thing is that a lot of the ideas that we have about education and how education should happen and where it should happen and in what order are really from a time when people were prepared to work in factories. Industrial Revolution, a lot of the education system is the Industrial Revolution's education system. And we kind of live in a different time now. Some people talk about the creative economy or the creative class that's emerging, and that people need to be upskilling faster, and they need to think about kind of being lifelong learners. And all of those ideas, I think, are not reflected by a lot of the institutional settings that we are still dealing with. So I really like this image. And for me, most of the things that I care about in learning, I can describe using just this one image. And also there's a personal connection. So it's not me on the photograph, but there are certain things that I see in this picture that I think are interesting. So one is, when you learn to ride a bike, it's like the world changes. Like there's that moment when you wobble along, and then like you take flight and you're riding. And it's like you can never go back. Nobody can unlearn to ride a bike. And for me, that's that moment of epiphany that we have when great learning happens, when we have a new idea, when we look at the world in a totally different way, and we can never go back. We can never unlearn that. And so for me, that's one aspect of kind of a learning adventure. And then the second one is, like, riding a bike is extremely powerful, right? If you're a young person and now you can ride a bike, you can go to places you couldn't go to before. So the world is a much smaller place because you can now ride a bike. And in the same way, I feel like good learning makes the world a smaller or a bigger place, but a different place, and kind of gives you maybe a different viewpoint on what's happening around you. And then the third point about riding a bike, it's a great example in learning through failure, right? And in this picture, there's the grass and there's the helmet, and so you fall off and you fall off and you fall off and you cry. And it's through failure and trying again and trying out different ways that you learn. And I think that's very important, that people have challenges and then it can be hard, but that ultimately it's safe and you're not going to die. And actually, I learned to ride a bike on a street. And so for me, the stakes were a little bit higher. But I did, I'm okay. I know how to ride a bike. And then the last piece of kind of my learning story with this picture is a very personal experience. I taught my sister how to ride a bike. My sister's 4 years younger than me, and she actually lives in Berlin. She's a curator at the Hamburger Bahnhof, which is an amazing museum, and you should all go there and look at her exhibitions. But I taught her to ride a bike because so she was struggling. Like somehow our father couldn't explain it to her, and she was afraid, and she didn't want to get on the bike, but I was closer to her, right? I'd learned to ride a bike just a few years before, so I understood that she was afraid. I understood what she needed, kind of where she needed help and what she needed help with. And that experience of like being invested in someone else's learning has been just an incredibly powerful, I guess, change in how I perceived of learning, where when you are starting to teach someone else, you probably learn a lot more than you learned when you were learning in the first place. And so I don't know if that applies totally to the bike, but my sister and I became very close. We trusted each other. And so there's all this other stuff in learning that I think is magical, and that's part of this adventure that we don't often talk about, that you can't test in quizzes. And so it would be kind of if we remember the slide with where everyone falls asleep when people talk on stage, it'd be kind of hypocritical if I just continued to talk on stage. So I thought what would be interesting is to do a little bit of an experiment, and to take a moment and for everyone to spend maybe 10 or 15 seconds and think about who you are today and what you like and what you do and what you're passionate about. And then think about a learning moment that made you good at who you are today. So if there's kind of a preparatory track to become the person that you are, then what is a moment in that history that you feel like you really learned something that made you the person who you are? And so we can take 15 seconds to think about that quietly. And then I want everyone to turn to their neighbor on either side and share your stories. And we can take 1 or 2 minutes, and I just want people to share their learning moments and stories. And I'm going to drink water while you do this. Okay, this is great. Maybe I should just leave, and you can carry on. So hopefully people have started conversations, and hopefully those conversations will carry on. And at the end, my Twitter handle is at the end of the slides. And if anyone wants to share stories, I would love to hear them. But I suspect, so I've had lots of conversations with people where I asked them this question. And often the first answer is a story about a very inspiring teacher or professor, often in school or in universities. And I think that's a really important piece of it, that we meet these people who inspire us to go in different directions. But then when you talk more about kind of the experiences and how you became who you are, often the kind of next things that come out in many cases haven't happened in schools or universities. They've happened by working on projects or doing internships or doing a thing with your friends. They're often based on passions that people had. So I had this unquenchable thirst for knowledge about space, whatever it is, whatever your interest is. It's like that's somehow that led you along and that made you learn something. So we talked a little bit about this. So it's very rarely that you're sitting at a desk when those moments happen, and it's very rarely that you're under pressure to learn. You may be working very hard and there may be a high risk, but it's often not that someone else tells you need to learn this, but it's more that you really, really want to learn this thing. And so I feel like when we talk about these things, we know what good learning is, and we've all felt it, and we can all put a finger on it. And then so often when we look at the institutions of how we organize learning, we seem to forget all of that. And we say, well, this is how we've always done it. There's the guy on the stage. He tells everyone, either in long videos or in short videos, essentially. And I feel like we're at this moment now where we can go two directions with technology. One is the direction that I would call transport, which is basically the university becomes this highly efficient kind of road network. So you want to go from Berlin to Hamburg, the university will get you there on the fastest possible way by train, rail, streets. It's like you get to choose where you want to go, but then it's kind of like you're going to follow all the roads. There's no way you can veer off the roads. And then the other thing that I'm more excited about is what I call adventure, which is, so you want to get to the top of the mountain, and mountains are also a great metaphor for learning, but you want to get to the top of the mountain, and maybe others have come before you, and they've mapped out the route, but there's nowhere where it says you can't go another way. And actually, the better you get, the more you want to go a different way. The more you want to, like people have come up with all these names for the different pieces here. It's all different people, right? They discovered like little pieces of this thing, and all together they built this learning pathway. And it was a huge adventure. And then the places where we learn should look more like this, right? It's like new challenges, you get to the first one, you go to the next one, but if you fall off, it's okay, because you're hanging on the rope, and there's a guy in a beanie standing there, and he's going to make sure you don't kill yourself. And then when you get really, really good, you should have an experience like this, right? That's what learning should be like, where, I mean, that must be amazing. Imagine you're that guy, and you've now climbed up this building, and you don't need the ropes anymore. Anyway, so maybe I get a little carried away. So I guess my mission has been, how can we create adventures like this that involve learning and technology and openness? And I founded a project, co-founded with a bunch of really amazing other people, a project Peer-to-Peer University. And the basic premise was really just that we were all kind of doodling along in the open education space, and we just said to each other, here, there's the web, there's all this amazing content out there, and there are millions of other people that you could learn with. And, well, let's just do something. And so we started offering courses. It's all run by volunteers. We've experimented with a range of different models. Most of it hasn't worked, and I'm happy to talk about all the things that haven't worked. And some of the things have worked, and I'll talk about some of the things that have worked in a little bit. I now am based at this place, and so is the lady who sits right there. Actually, you can see where I sit right there. If you ever come to visit, in that little corner there, I will be sitting, looking out the window. And the Media Lab is an interesting place because most of my work has been outside of institutions because I've always kind of poked fun a little bit at the existing models and I wanted to challenge them. And the Media Lab is an institution that challenges the idea of the institution. It has 3 ways that it measures what it's doing. And Göran has heard this, but its impact, its uniqueness, and its magic. So any project that the Media Lab does has to have those 3 characteristics. And if you have an evaluation of your project, you can use those 3 characteristics and say, my project had maybe not so much impact, it was pretty unique, but it had an amazing amount of magic. And magic is one of those things like learning, like you know when it's there. Maybe you can't do a rubric or a multiple choice test to say if it's magic or not, but you know it when you see it. And then also what drew me to the Media Lab is the Media Lab has a very, very strong philosophy of learning, partly because of some of the amazing people who've worked there and done research, like Mitch Resnick, who runs the Lifelong Kindergarten group, which is the group that I work with. But the philosophy of learning at the Media Lab centers around 4 components. One is you always have to make stuff. Like you can have an interesting idea, but unless you make something with the idea, it's not it doesn't really count. You need to make it because when you make something, you learn a lot more than when you just think about it. And usually the first try goes wrong. And so then you learn a lot about doing it better and kind of iterating on that. Secondly, you follow your passions. You find something you are really, really interested in, and then you just go for it. And if that doesn't fit into the curriculum, it doesn't matter. There's space for pretty much anything at the Media Lab. Third element is this element of playfulness, which by playfulness, I don't mean it's all fun necessarily, but it's something where you can fail and it's safe to fail. You can, like computer games, you can do something, it doesn't go, you get killed, you try again, you try again, you try again, eventually you get it right. So there's that kind of, that playful approach to learning new things. And it's peer-to-peer, and peer-to-peer doesn't necessarily mean that everyone knows the same thing. Actually, quite the contrary. Peer-to-peer describes the power hierarchy between the people engaging with each other. There's always someone who knows more than you in a certain area, but if you talk to them kind of on the same level, you both learn a lot more. And so at the Media Lab, for the most part, and the Media Lab isn't perfect, but for the most part, people do engage on this peer-to-peer level, and it's often hard to know if someone is a student or a professor or a researcher or just visiting some guy who walked in from the street. And I think that's kind of an important component of this. Okay, so I want to talk about, we're talking about MOOCs here, so I want to talk about 2 projects that we played around with. And I should say that I wasn't so excited by the MOOCs, and I still am not. But the first, and that explains maybe the first project we did, which was really more of a joke. So we saw all these MOOCs being developed, huge amounts of money being spent on them. Everyone was very excited because of the massive numbers of people that signed up. And just felt like we already had all those pieces in place, and just using the web and a little bit of open source software, we could build things that aren't like the MOOCs, but that are kind of similar. And so we set out to build what we called the mechanical MOOC. And the idea was, we were just going to use resources that already exist. We weren't going to build anything else. We weren't going to build any real technology, just going to use services that anyone can access. And we were going to see what we can come up with and see if people want to do it. And so what we did is we chose a topic that is very attractive. It's learning Python, which is a programming language that a lot of people want to learn. And we picked really good content from MIT OpenCourseware that's available for free on their website. And we picked tutorials from Code Academy, which is a startup that helps people learn to code. And you can do these little experiments online. You submit your answers. So it's kind of the similar idea of the mini quizzes, except you are actually writing code. And then we used OpenStudy, which is a big question and answer forum for people who learn online. And so they can go there, they can ask a question, and other people may help them to kind of come through it. We've run it 3 times. It's had about 10,000 people sign up. It's cost almost nothing. And it's now, we have these donations, like in week 7. So it's basically, the way it works is you sign up and we send you emails. That's it. And we just point you to the right places. And then you go and you work with the other people and you figure out the rest yourself. And in week 7, we ask if anyone has a good time or has had a good time or is still around in week 7, you want to drop a few bucks into our donation jar, that would be great because we have to pay to send out these emails. And people don't, so one is the survival strategy for open education projects based on small individual donations does not work, or at least not for us. And the amount of money you get is ridiculously low. But the cost you have to run something like this is also ridiculously low. Like this doesn't cost more than $200 now to run for each round, just for sending out the emails. Like we don't really do anything anymore. And we get enough donations to cover the cost of emails. So we've built a sustainable MOOC. It just happens to cost only $200 to run. So we did the first one. It was a bit of a joke. We were kind of surprised by how well it went, and also we got a little excited about it. We were like, wow, if you have 10,000 people sign up, you can do really interesting things with them. You don't just have to send them email. And so we got a little more ambitious, and we said, why don't we try this with a Media Lab course? And so that's what we did. We picked a course that's taught at the Media Lab to students once a year called Creative Learning Technologies. We called it Learning Creative Learning. This is the professor and also the person that I work with, Mitch Resnick. It's a coincidence, but he looks like the Lego clown in the background of the video, which a lot of people commented on, and which is kind of became a bit of a joke or a meme of the course. He teaches the course to 15 or 17 students, I think, this semester. It's almost over. We have one more session next Monday. And we thought, well, what happens if we open this up? But we open it up kind of in a way that would make sense for the online participants, because the class is very hands-on. Like there's a different topic you work on every week, and how could we translate that online? And we also knew that we didn't really know how to do it, like that this was going to be a massive experiment. Lots of things were going to go wrong, and it actually says down here, and it says like the first 4 or 5 emails we send everyone, we just repeated this over and over. This is a big experiment. Things will break. What is it? We don't have all the answers. Sometimes we plan, I don't even know what it says anymore, but anyway, basically we invited people to help to figure it out with us, and they really responded to that. They were much more engaged, and they kind of bought into this idea that they can build this course with us, which was great because we really didn't know how to do this. So because we weren't sure how to do it, we also didn't want to invest a lot of money in building a platform or tools. So we used a bunch of open source stuff like a sign-up form, and we use the same email scheduler that we use for the mechanical MOOC, where you can just mass email people in small groups. And then we used Google Plus tools. We used Google Plus communities, and we used Google Plus Hangouts extensively. Not because we think they are necessarily the best tools, but what we liked about Google Plus is it starts with this idea of social rather than content. There are lots of other platforms that we could have used, like Google has a course builder platform that lets you run these large courses. It starts with content, and we wanted to start with something that feels differently. So we started with Google Plus because we liked the social aspect and we loved the Hangouts. And it doesn't cost you anything to do this. You can, anyone can just create an account and run it through Google Plus. So maybe one word about numbers. So we had about 25,000 people sign up for the course, and then in the Google Plus community, which is really the core of where the collaboration happens, there are just under 11,000 people now. The other people just get the emails and they work on their own. To be honest, we don't really know what they do, but they weren't interested in joining the community. And then we invited people to start their own little groups, because we feel like it's really important that if you have this large community, that's awesome. But if you have a small community, it's a very different quality of interaction. As you get to know people over kind of the weeks of the course, you learn to trust them, you get much more invested in their learning, and you become friends, right? And maybe some of the best outcomes of learning and education are that you make lifelong friends, right? Like at least for me, some of my best friends are people I met at school and university. And just because you spend time with them and you're learning together and you kind of get to know each other. And so we feel like the small groups are really, really important. And so this is one of the things that we really haven't figured out yet. Now, I've looked at the survey data, and the small groups is a problem we haven't figured out yet. But what was awesome is 450 people started small groups. So there were at least 450 small groups. Those are the ones that we knew about, and we only knew about them because one of the participants made a spreadsheet and invited all the other participants to put their links into the spreadsheet. And so they created an archive and directory of all the groups, and then they started giving the groups names. So they had these team names, and then they started kind of making jokes about each other. And anyway, so you had all the interesting things happening that happen when you have lots of people in small groups. Distribution was really both global, and the interesting thing about this map is we didn't make this map. A participant from Italy made the map, wrote a little tutorial, how do you put your pin in the map, and then became the curator of the map. And over weeks, people put the pins in the wrong place, deleted other people's pins, and Adriano was there, and he like very gently explained it over and over again, and he made the map. And when we had the first exchange, he said on the Google+, he said, you know, it would be amazing if there was a map and we could all see where everyone else is. And we just said, Adriano, that's an amazing idea, you should do it. And he made it, and then we featured it, and he kind of has become a really important member and collaborator in this course. But anyway, so the point I want to make is there's global, but then there's also local, and I think local is important. So this is a picture we got from a local school where people meet once a week and they work on the course materials together. And the way the course works is, it's a little bit different from typical online courses. There's some PowerPoint weirdness or... so every week we introduce an interesting concept from the creative learning space. And then we invite people to do an activity. So they can still read about it. We give them articles, and if they want to dig into those, that's fine. But we always start with the activity. And so people then like experience the idea hands-on, and they reflect on the experience. And we feel it's a much better way to learn, and also it builds community in a different way. And my favorite one is the one we did in the first week, which is the Marshmallow Challenge. And I'm kind of running out of time, but anyway, it's amazing. You should do this. You look it up online, the Marshmallow Challenge. You can do it with your friends, or with your kids, or with your students, or with your work people. And the best thing about it is the group that's really, really bad at it is business executives. They're terrible. The group that's really, really amazing at it, kindergarten graduates. Recent graduates of kindergarten, amazing at it. Anyway, we did weekly seminars, so we did a lot of things wrong. We did long videos that people had to watch. These were almost an hour long, and there were always conversations. We invited experts, and then we had a really just lively conversation with your friends, and people could watch it either live or record it. Is this me? No. What was interesting is there was a lot more interest in the event character, where people wanted to watch it at the same time than we had anticipated. But we also gave them, because it's hard to watch a video over a long period of time and you're feeling kind of alone, we gave them a very good back channel, and we've been experimenting with this open source package that lets you run these chat rooms around videos, and you can embed the video here. We can start and stop the video for everyone who's in the chat room. And people really loved the chat room. So after the first session, which was actually on the previous slide, so this is the director of the Media Lab, Joey Ito. This is Mitch Resnick, and that's Joey's sister, Mimi Ito, who's an academic at University of California, Irvine. And they were talking about interest-based learning, and they were talking about their personal differences. Mimi is like the poster child student, always great in school, loved school, has PhDs from all these fancy places. Joey's the opposite, almost dropped out of school, never finished college, doesn't have a degree. And both of them are just these passionate learners. And so there was a great conversation. And afterwards in the back channel, people were saying, that was a really good conversation, but the back channel was much more interesting than Joey and Mimi. And we loved it, and we told Joey and Mimi, and they also loved it. Because it's just like there's that community that's kind of making it work for themselves. And I think this is part of the reason why it works. Like if you can make new friends through learning, that's a really important component of a great learning experience. And one last example of what people kind of contributed, there's one participant who, I think she's in the Netherlands, but she made these illustrations after each seminar. She made an illustration, she shared it with the whole group, and people really loved them, and there was always a long discussion about kind of what she left out and what she put in, and did she do it the right way. But just like the fact that people felt invited to participate. And we so the first one, the mechanical MOOC, cost almost nothing to build. This one, we had a few people kind of keeping an eye on it, but we didn't build it. We didn't build fancy software. We didn't produce high-quality videos. It was not an expensive thing, and it was fun. And I think like Mitch loved it, and the other people he runs the course with had a really good time, and they connected to a much larger audience. And so I think it's a good example for experimentation and prototyping that you don't have to be an expert, you don't have to be a super geek. You can use tools that are out there that are available to anyone free of cost. And you can just be playful and you can come up with new ways of doing this. And I feel like this is such an amazing moment for more of us to do this. And all of you have skills and experiences with learning and maybe frustrations that you could start building learning experiences for others. And if that's something you're interested in, I'm not saying everyone should do this, but if that's something you're interested in and you want to get started or you have an idea, like, I'm super happy to talk to anyone about this. And so, like, my two points are really that I would like to see an education future that looks more like adventures rather than transport. And there is an opportunity to build that right now. And I feel like it's kind of too important to let that opportunity slip away. And then secondly, like, practice over theory. Like, if you want to get involved, you want to build something, just don't feel like held back by maybe you're not an expert or maybe you haven't studied pedagogy. I haven't studied pedagogy. Actually, many of the very interesting people in this space are not education specialists. They're open source developers. They come from community organizations. They just bring a really different lens to this. Anyway, those are two Twitter handles that you can find me at. Schmidt-Fee is a little more personal, quirky. Inappropriate. P2PU is more professional learning stuff. And please reach out and get in touch. And I think do we have a minute for a question, or are we out of time? We're out of time, sorry. Anyway, thank you very much.